Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am O'Brien McMahon, and this is People Business. In this episode, I'm joined by Cece Sykes. Cece is a consultant and senior trainer with the Internal Family Systems Institute, where she specializes in trauma and addiction and educates therapists internationally on how to apply the IFS therapy model to addictive processes. She lectures, consults, and provides workshops and retreats on these and related topics, and maintains a consultation practice of her own in her lifelong home of Chicago. Cece's recent book, IFS Therapy for Addiction, Trauma-Informed, Compassion-Based Interventions for Substance Use, Eating, Gambling, and More, was released in March of 2023. I was sitting with a group of folks, a lot of whom were people leaders in business, and I said, what are other topics you would be interested in hearing explored on the show? And someone recommended addiction as an interesting topic. And she said, as a people leader, it can be really hard to approach the topic of addiction or of any kind of substance abuse or behavioral disorder with an employee. And I think that's true just in our lives. We've all seen people who are struggling in some way, whether it's with alcohol or anything else. We know they're struggling, but we're not sure how to approach it with them in a way that will make them feel comfortable, that won't see some blowback on us or have the person explode emotionally. And so I reached out to a therapy friend of mine, Carolyn Sellers, who's been on the show. Befriending Your Inner Critic was the name of that episode. Fantastic episode that's helped a lot of people. And she said, if you can get Cece on, she would be a huge win for your audience, and she's an expert. And sure enough, she delivered in this conversation. She has a ton of great, useful information for people to have these really difficult conversations. She also has a lot in here for people who are thinking about changing their own behavior, whether we consider ourselves an addict or to have some addiction or anything, from our phone to food to really anything. If there's any behavior that we are seeing kind of creep into an unhealthy manner and we want to curb it back and gain more control over it, she shares a lot of great stuff that we can do and a lot of great thought processes that we can reset ourselves with to live ultimately the happy lives that we want to live. I hope you enjoy this. I got a ton out of it. Here is Cece Sykes. Cece, welcome to the show. Very excited to have you on. I had a friend of mine suggest the topic of addiction for an episode of the podcast. And I reached out to a couple friends of mine who are therapists. And one of them said, OMG, if you can get Cece Sykes on your show, she is the best. And I reached out to you and you were kind enough to come on. And so I and a couple of my friends could not be more excited to have you on the show.
Oh, well, thanks, O'Brien. It's good to be here. And I love that you want to talk about this. One of my favorite topics.
All right. Well, let's dive in. One of the reasons that my friend who's an HR leader had suggested this is a lot of people deal with addiction or have some kind of issues going on in their lives that are affecting them personally, and it shows up on the outside. And oftentimes people can see it who are around them. It affects performance, it affects attitude and behavior, but we don't know how to approach that subject and deal with it and try to help that person get better in a meaningful way. And a lot of times people just don't do anything about it, or
Right.
They try to do something about it, get a bad reaction, and then they flip to the worst case scenario with that person, which if you're an HR leader would be firing that person, which, doesn't help them get to a better situation. So excited to dive in here. And let's just talk about the word addiction to start. Because I know I said that when we did our prep call and you're like, I don't really like that word. So what terminology should we use and how should we think about people who I may deem addicted or somebody with addiction?
Right. Well, first of all, of course, the word addiction is commonly understood. And I'm not saying I never use it, but I like to change when we're trying to change our thinking and certainly trying to think about talking sensitively to someone we're worried about. One of the hardest things is sort of us diagnosing them. Well, you're an addict. You've got an addiction. I can see you've got an addiction. And that kind of diagnosis doesn't really help the conversation, and it doesn't help things move forward. I like to think of this as an addictive process. I also think that's actually more accurate reflection of what's going on in that person's life. They didn't wake up one day, drinking a fifth before they went to work, right? These things have progressed over time. They may be related to things earlier in their life. They may be accelerated by something that recently occurred. So this has been a process that they've been in. And I think it's more respectful of their experience to say, I feel like there's some kind of processing going on with you, something that's happening with you that's going on, and I see you changing. I think it leaves the opening for them to also weigh in on this, which is what you really want.
And so we'll get into facilitating the conversation, but if we can sort of just stay with this topic of addiction and addiction process first, we often hear now, especially with alcohol, that addiction's a disease.
Correct.
And at the same time, you're talking about it as kind of a spectrum and a process, something that people can kind of flow into and something that they can potentially flow out of. So is this like a disease that we can treat, or is this like a disease that's just part of us that we have to sort of deal with all the time? Help me understand how I should be thinking about what an addictive process is for somebody who has one.
That issue, you're zoning in on something really key here, O'Brien, and it's sort of the way our culture and our profession has struggled to look at these issues. We used to be very moralistic. They lacked willpower. There was a problem, sort of a personality problem, right?
Yeah.
And they went into disease to be less stigmatizing. But in fact, to say, well, this is a medical issue, you have a disease. But that doesn't always land well with people. For some people, they say, yeah, I have a disease, and it actually feels like a relief to them. Like, okay, I have this thing and I can work on it, and I'm allergic and I can't use alcohol, and that's how it works for me. But in general, the idea that the brain is diseased is not something that I sign on to, and that many, many experts don't sign on to. Of course, the brain is deeply affected by alcohol use or drug use. It's also deeply affected by every habit we have. Gambling, food issues, all of those things impact the functioning of the brain. So what I like to think about in the way we work with addictive processes through kind of sort of some mindful techniques also helps someone interact with their brain a little differently. So I like to stay open to the idea of this possibility rather than stick with this idea of this person's brain is diseased. For many, many people, that feels like a really hopeless diagnosis.
Yeah.
Well, then what should I do? The point is that you want someone to feel energized to do something about it. And in fact, they might be like, well, I'm effed, well, okay, great. Yeah. I may as well keep it up. This is not the reaction we're looking for.
Okay. And I do like acknowledging that there's something going on.
Of course.
But yeah, I think trying to put a label on it, the moralistic that we know that that's not right. And the disease doesn't quite feel right. It feels right for some people, but not for everybody. And so I think, as you said in the beginning, like words matter and how we talk about this stuff matters. And so I think spending some time working on the terminology can be important.
Especially where you're interacting with people, because you're not interacting in some kind of treatment center. You're interacting in the business environment.
Yeah.
So you really aren't in a place where you want to put yourselves as having to diagnose and label. You want to have clear, effective communication. You're checking in with these people. It's a very different setting. And so how can you make that effective? So one of the ways is to, how do you think about it when you're sitting down with someone? If you think about it as this person has got the brain disease that, what are you thinking? Are you thinking they're hopeless?
And so what's a good frame of mind to be in when you sit down to have that conversation? Like, how should people be priming themselves emotionally so that they can handle it the right way?
Well, first, just kind of notice what reactivity they're feeling toward the person. Are they feeling kind of recoil, like they're feeling just off-put by the person's behavior? Are they feeling sad for that person, like sorry for them? Are they feeling afraid of them? Person's explosive. So are they feeling confused? So they want to notice your first reaction to them, and you don't want to act from that reaction.
Yeah.
You can acknowledge, I'm mad, I'm upset, I'm a little nervous about this person. You can acknowledge those parts of you, those natural reactions to extreme behavior that we all have. But what you want to do is have that step back and start open-minded. As the beginner's mind, as Eastern practitioners might say, is to say, I don't know yet. I'm having a conversation. So you want to start with collaboration. How can you and I both find out what's going on here?
So that makes me think of a comedy bit that my wife showed me the other day. And it was a comedian talking about getting married and asking his father, who had been married for, I don't know, 30 something years, 40 something years, what's the secret to marriage? And he said, the dad said, oh, that's easy. Always say the third thing that comes to your mind.
Yes, that's perfect.
He said, never say the first thing and don't trust the second thing. Always go with the third thing. And
yeah, absolutely. Because in a fraught situation, our emotions are high, and our emotions are high too when we have to have a tough conversation. And in extreme behavior, whether it's extreme depression or extreme acting out, creates reactivity in us. That's natural. So you don't want to shame ourselves for like, I don't even know. I don't want to talk to this guy. But at the same time, that's not where we want to start.
So where do we start? So, I mean, obviously there's different degrees. If we smell alcohol in somebody's breath or something like that, like there's some protocols that HR would have to follow to make sure the work environment's safe and that kind of a thing. But let's just say we notice somebody's behavior has shifted. Unfortunately, we had this with somebody that I work with where something happened in their life and all of a sudden it was like interacting with a different person. And like their mannerisms changed, their speech patterns changed, their emotions changed. And everybody was like, I mean, something is going on here.
Right.
What's the right way to broach that conversation with somebody where we think there might be an issue?
Well, your intention is for you to help them feel free to tell you that they too are concerned. That's your goal. If
Not
you're
that
in the
they have a
position
problem, that they're concerned.
Right.
That's good. Yeah,
I'd start there. Yeah, right. Like, you get that there's a problem here, right, guy? You know,
yeah,
it's what you might want to say. And then that's what you're saying to your colleagues before you get ready for the meeting. But when you're sitting down, what you want to do is stay open-minded, describe behaviors that you've noticed and say, I want to have a conversation with you around this. And just to see if we can have a dialogue. Are you aware that you're coming across differently? Are you, just check out where they're going to, how they're going to respond to you. And the goal being, even if they start defensive, they might say, yeah. They may just be like, okay, yeah, no, it's been kind of I've been messed up lately. And now you have your foot holding. All right, you tell me what you've noticed. Now it's on them, right? And this is what you want, for them to be able to speak about the fact that they're going through difficulties. If you're the only one who's noticing difficulties, you're getting nowhere, right? You're getting stonewalled. So in order to avoid stonewall, you start open. No walls there. The other way to go around when they say, well, no, I'm fine. What are you talking about? You want to have some evidence, if you will, not evidence in the sense of being a detective, but some clear ideas. And I will prepare for this meeting very carefully. This is what we've noticed. This is what people have said. Who's saying that? I'm not getting into who's and how's. I'm just going to tell you that people have been concerned. And I want you to know I'm coming from a place of concern where I want to have a conversation with you. So if it's HR, they're already afraid what's going to happen to me. Is there going to be an outcome?
Yeah.
Right.
I was just going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Right. Aren't they going to want to be defensive? So you want to be clear right now. Do you have to take action? And if you don't, if what you need to do is just have a conversation first, you want to be clear. This is not about outcome. I don't have an agenda here other than to help you and I coming to a common understanding about what's going on. That's my agenda with you. And because the other piece is, are they going to talk to you if they need to have trust?
Yeah.
And so you need to know what are your responsibilities and be open about what are your where is this going to go? Who do you have to report this to? How much confidentiality is here? Even if it's something more related to depression, because they've got a caretaker issue, a marriage issue, their partner left them. What is going to go further than this room? And that's what you have to be able to tell them and be clear about it and be able to stick to it. Otherwise, they're not going to want to take risks with you.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point there too, is like, this is a good framework to use for any issue that somebody is facing, whether they are addicted to something or not. If they're depressed, if they're dealing with bipolar, if they're just have something going on in their life that they're concerned about, that's drawing their attention away. These are good ways. I think here's what we've noticed and concern I have, or Do you have any concern around this too? Have you noticed this yourself? I think that's a great entry to helping anybody.
Right. And when they say no,
Yeah.
if that's where they go, I'm good here. What is this meeting really about?
Yeah.
You may have to discuss the trust issue, which is how far is this information going to go?
Yeah.
And if it's like, listen, this is between us. I don't have to go further. I don't want to go further. I just want to get clear between you and I about what's going on. And then I will be persistent. So is there, and this is the language of the internal family systems model, but is there any part of you, have you ever had any concern that this drinking thing was maybe getting a little out of hand? Have you ever woke up any morning and said to yourself, whoa, this has gotten a little too far? Have you ever had that? So this is where you're going. It does not matter that they sign on 100%. It matters that they have an acknowledgement. There's your foothold. In this conversation, this isn't your job to diagnose them. It isn't their job to sign on to a full diagnosis of themselves in this moment. It's merely to get this conversation going and start, okay, we have a place of concern. Now we have a shared point of view going on.
Yeah, I like that. I've interviewed a couple hostage negotiators on the show.
Wow.
And one of the fascinating conversations, but one of the things that they both talk about is not being on a timeline.
Nice.
Trying to taking as much time as it takes to get that person emotionally where you need them to go. Because originally, everyone in that kind of a situation has really heightened emotion. And one of the gentlemen said, rationality and emotion are a teeter-totter. They can't both be high at the same time. And so if somebody's high in emotion, which they generally are when you say, have you noticed this problem in yourself? It takes time to bring that emotion down so that their rational mind can come back up. And I think I'm totally guilty of this, of like seeing an issue, wanting to fix it, seeing potential outcomes and like wanting to move somebody in that direction. But it is, as I see all the time when I make this mistake, if we can get ourselves to a spot where we realize that there's no time limit on this and that we just want to help this person move down the path, it just seems, I'm hearing you kind of say the same thing that they were saying in a hostage negotiation setting, is like, you want to help that person however long it's going to take.
That's right. I would say it takes a process for someone to get to a problematic time. It takes time and it's happened over time. It's also a process to get out. And I realize this is a business setting and you do want to sort of like, let's get down to it. But what often happens is that people delay. The issue goes on for months. And then it's like some big thing happens. They say there's some event that occurs and now we're going to have the talk. And at the end of the talk, there's going to be a plan.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I mean? The plan won't work. There's another message that I would really put out there is when you begin to see behavior change earlier, sooner rather than later, to begin the conversation. And then you have one that say, let's meet again in a couple of weeks. Let's see how this is going. And you may want to have some expectation. If there is some change at work, you may want to say, what we're looking for is this. We're looking for you to show up on time, or some of these projects aren't coming in on time. Or, some of the stuff that's happening between you and so, it's not working out well. There's, you're not solving these problems. So here, can we agree to these expectations? Let's check in again in a couple of weeks. So you can have a couple of expectations and then set it up so that it is a process of being with someone. If this is an employee that you value, then you give them that hour every couple of weeks, right? What most people do though is wait until it's an emergency and then try to fix it and say, you need rehab.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. I've seen the light.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing that I'd love to get your reaction to is you talked about building trust in the beginning. And there's a leadership development coach that I work with who talks about anytime you're going to give feedback, it always helps to lead with belief. That expressing belief in somebody is a great way to get through their defenses. And I've seen this work, and I've specifically said, hey, the reason I want to have this conversation today, as difficult as it might be, is because I think you're great and I think you could be better and I think you're holding yourself back. And they were like, oh, okay. And it just totally disarmed them. I have found that really works. And it seems like that would be something that applies here. Like, hey, you're great and valued here. We believe that you're going to continue to be that way. but we've seen some behavior that we want to talk about and see if we can work through it to get you back to who we know you are, like that kind of conversation path.
That's a beautiful way to start that conversation. There's in family therapy back in the day, they used to have something called, when you had to give tough information, feedback to a family, stroke kick. Sounds a little rough, but first to tell them what's going well, and then say, and we have some more things to discuss. So if you do value this employee, this is why you're having this conversation, and you are concerned for them, and there is value in what they've been doing. You've been doing this, and this so well. Even the person who's sort of like overworking and you're kind of worried that they've just kind of gone off some deep end. They're sort of like manicky about it all. And you're actually worried that it's gone too far and they're sort of losing it. Just wherever it takes you this is what we see that's going so well. This is why we want to have this conversation with you. And I think that that's really helpful. And the way you said it too is a person's like, okay, I'm not in trouble. And what does that do? I don't have to defend myself.
Yeah.
So
when you're setting them up as a good person, not as a bad person, you're setting them up as a good person, and you want to help them continue to be a good person.
Right. And that's why if you wait months while you watch this person go down the tubes with using whatever they're using, by the time that happens, there's a lot of reactivity in the organization around this person.
Yeah.
So it's going to be difficult even for the person in HR to have this conversation because there's things that have built up. So sooner rather than later also helps some of the intensity come out of the situation, which if we have less intensity, then they will respond with less defensiveness. We sort of have this setup, right? Hierarchy, one up to one down. And what does a person do when they're one down? Defend.
Yeah.
Put themselves back up. You're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Reactants, right? People don't like to be told what to do or told that they're bad.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
Everyone likes autonomy.
Let's talk. I know we're getting into like real specifics here, but I think this is the stuff that's really helpful, because it's easy to say, oh, well, just pull them into your office and ask if everything's okay. Ask if they've noticed any changes. But that conversation could go very wrong without some thought and practice. And so the other part I want to dive into here, dissect a little bit, is the directness of the examples that you have. Because I've given feedback to people before, not about addiction, but I've given feedback to people before where it's like, well, people are saying this. And that almost always goes poorly.
Right.
Versus saying, hey, I understand you've done X, Y, and Z. And then you're having a real tangible conversation. But if you're just talking about kind of their reputation or rumors that are out there, one, it's easy for them to deny it. And two, it's really hard for you to make it tangible for people. So could you just talk to how somebody should prepare the directness and the examples and that part of the conversation so that they can sort of stick to their position when the person says no or tries to skirt their way out of the tough conversation?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the person in HR is in a delicate position. They really don't have to maintain a certain amount of confidentiality about people who have given them feedback, but at the same time, they want to be clear to the person they're speaking to. So it's sort of a dilemma, right? Mm-hmm. But I would just really, as much as they can, think about the behavior of that person and what they personally have observed. And if they can, to say, a couple of people on your team have come to me and they are coming to me in the same way I'm coming to you. They came to me because they want someone to have a good conversation with you and they're concerned. They like you, they like working with you, and they want to make this work. So if you can sort of speak to the sources to some extent, I think that helps. As you say, that sort of generalized thing gives people that paranoid feeling. Like people are just talking about me and what are they really saying? And it makes them feel very fearful. Yeah. So to be as specific as you can, allowing for a certain amount of confidences, but to be as specific as you can, and the point of view of the people, wherever you get your information, that there's a place of concern, not a place of judgment. Even if there is judgment, you want to come from concern, right? Yeah.
How do you do this as a therapist when you're talking to somebody and you don't have people giving you examples of the behavior?
Right.
But you want to sort of uncover example. Like, what language do you use to draw it out of the patient?
Well, the one thing I have going for me that you might not have going for you, although it might happen occasionally, is they're coming to me.
Yeah.
So, and I don't, in HR, they're not coming to you, but when someone's coming to me, they want something. They essentially want a change in their life. So what I always come back to is tell me more about what you want. And that's also something I could imagine you having a conversation with employees, which is what's your vision, or in your ideal world? I love to ask this question. In your ideal world, what would this look like for you? If you could change your job exactly the way you wanted, what would it look like for you? If you and I work together down the road in 6 months, what will be different? In a year from now, what will be different? So asking those kinds of questions around their vision and staying with that a little. I don't know. I guess I wouldn't be here so long, or I guess this would be different, or I guess I'd be a little bit more in control. So listening to what they want out of the situation. Maybe they want more control. Maybe they want more autonomy. Maybe they want less pressure. When you're talking to someone who's drinking a lot or using a lot or in some way medicating themselves, they are under stress. So the way we think about it, and then we haven't talked about this too much yet, O'Brien, but in terms of the model, the psychotherapy model that I steeped in, that I use and that I teach, is called internal family systems. So it views our sort of psyche systemically as sort of set up in terms, if you want to put it in work way, you got our kind of manager parts that take care of life, take care of work, responsibilities, home, family members, etc. And we've got play or off work-life balance. How do I rest, resource? I ask people all the time, what do you do when you first come home from work? What's the first thing you do? What's the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning? For some, what's coming up for you when you wake up in the morning? Some people wake up with enormous dread, enormous anxiety. And that's something that you could have a conversation around in the work environment. What are they wake up dreading going to work. That's important information for you to have. Or at the end of the day, they're completely beat, exhausted, have nothing left for anyone else. That's what it's like for them at this point. So in this model, we just sort of view all of us universally as having task orientation and needing to do something else, rest and relax and do and accomplish and improve. And underneath it all is our sort of shared humanity. All of us need to feel loved, valued. We have sensitivity to being hurt, some more than others, but no one's incapable of being hurt. Trust issues. Who do we trust? Who do we not trust? Wanting to be trustworthy, wanting to be seen, wanting to be valued. So if someone's not feeling valued at work and or under pressure and not seen for what they think they're contributing, this will impact their needs to act out, if you will.
So I have done one episode on here that covers a decent amount of internal family systems with Carolyn Sellers, who's actually the woman who recommended I reach out to you. So if listeners are interested and want to dive into that, it's called Befriending Your Inner Critic with Carolyn Sellers.
Beautiful.
And we talk about some work that she did with me. It was funny. She was a prospect of mine at work because she was in HR. And then she went back to her psychotherapy work and I became a patient of hers. And now we're just really great friends. But I saw internal family systems have a big impact with me because I have a part of me that wants to go. And I've got another part of me that just wants to relax all the time. And I feel really guilty about that part, or I did feel really guilty about that part. Like, well, I'm lazy. What am I doing? And she helped me realize that they're just two competing voices and that they're each trying to help me do something. And so if one of them is overreacting, like if my rest voice is overreacting and I'm not getting the things done at work that I need to be doing, I can actually ask that part of myself, what are you trying to protect me against? Or what is it that you want here? And if you really listen to yourself, I realized that I wanted to make sure I wasn't burning myself out. And I wanted to make sure that I had this creativity in my life and these other things. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to build that into my life and I'll give you what you need. But right now I need to go hard. And it helped me go hard and it helped me get through that period of time and sort of balance those parts of myself. So I've seen that work. And one of the realizations I've had that I think is important, I actually shared this with somebody earlier this week, is that just because you have two parts of yourself doesn't mean there's anything wrong. Like you can have parts of yourself that have competing priorities and that's fine. It's just a matter of being able to tease out each one and saying, well, what are each of these trying to achieve? And then which one do I need to be giving the attention to right now? At least that has been a realization for me. I don't want to speak to what internal family systems is, but that's sort of the power that I've seen it have for me. And I would love to hear any additional commentary you have on that, or how people can use those different parts or address those different parts to get through something they're dealing with.
Well, I love the example you're using, O'Brien, and I actually do think it's pretty universal. The IFS model was developed by talking to people, and we use words like parts, and I feel like I'm more myself just because that's what clients were saying. So it's not this idea that was put on human experience. It emerged from human experience.
Oh, interesting.
So that the founder, Richard Schwartz, who's actually from here in the Chicago area, was working with eating disordered people. And they were like, they would have these various food practices, and then another part of them that hated it, absolutely hated. So that inner self-loathing, and then this acting out. And finally, he used family systems. And family systems, like if there's two parents, right? If mom's real easy, dad tends to be tough. If dad's tough, mom will be like, hey, why? Because you're actually, every system is really looking for balance. And it's intuitive. That is a principle that's beyond the human experience. That's systems principles. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So between two parents, and then, in our day, we don't have to have a dad and mom, two moms, two dads, whoever is running the family. Doesn't matter. The gender doesn't matter. If one tends to say, well, listen, we've got to get control of this. This has got to get better. One was like, let's just give it more time, right?
Yeah.
And so what we used to say as family therapists is we'd say, you know what? The kids need both. They need more time sometimes, and they need some real tough boundaries sometimes. They need both of you, right? They need both of you. But we have to work with both of you so that you don't polarize against each other. How can you find where you each have a common intention to raise these kids the right way? Those same principles apply to the inner world between our sense of we label them managers just because it's user-friendly language. The other side are like soothers. We also sometimes call them firefighters because they'll step in fast to take us out, right? To put out the fires of shame or worthlessness, right? So we all have parts of us that have to perform at work, at school, wherever we're doing, in families, with our friends, obligations that we have. And then we all need something else in life. We need rest, relaxation, sweetness. This Janine Roth, who was written a lot about eating disorders, she came to our conference once and held up a Hershey's Kiss for everybody. And then she passed them all out, a couple hundred people. She said, we all need a little sweetness in life every day, and it just really went right in, because this is so often we judge the parts of us that want sweetness or rest or relaxation. And that judgment from our managers judging, just what you're talking about, Brian. Why what's wrong with you? You're lazy. That judgment sets up a reactivity. It actually works to increase the desire to get away because it adds pressure to the system.
Yeah.
So what we're looking for is reducing that pressure.
So is it fair to say then that people who are struggling with an addictive process, that could be that firefighter part, that savior part that's trying to help them out of a situation that they find to be really dangerous for themselves, that it could actually be that part that is driving them to a bad behavior, to say, hey, you're facing something in the world that is so psychically painful that we just want to help you escape from that. And so we're going to direct you to this other part. Does that happen, or is that what you see?
That's exactly what I see. You said
Okay.
it perfect. So that if someone is feeling, it's sort of cyclic, you can diagnose the problem from any angle. And I'll explain that in a moment. But yes, someone who's engaged in sort of acting out behavior with food, with alcohol, and often it's not just the one thing, right? It's use and hook up. It's gamble and drink. It's drink and overeat or restrict, or exercise my head off. How many people exercise, run with an injured knee, right? Mm-hmm. With a bad back. It's like a manager that became a firefighter. They can't stop.
Yeah.
They have mood dysregulation. So whatever, those kinds of parts are all trying to escape, and they are trying to escape some kind of psychic pain, and also trying to escape pressure from managers. If they have a part of them constantly pushing them, if they grew up constantly sort of believing that they weren't enough unless they performed, unless they went to this school, earned this amount of money, got to this position in the company. If this is on the manager's side, the firefighters are going to try to balance that out. And if you add to it some other kinds of in addition to that sort of, am I enough feeling, other kinds of difficulties in life, a loss, then what we need to medicate just grows. Our medicators will come through for us.
So I think this might just be a good point to say, if somebody's not thinking it already, if you or somebody that you are trying to help is struggling with this and wants some help, finding a specialist in internal family systems, like looking for that specifically, could be a really good starting point. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. I think that going to talk, just to get some relief, to reach out. People, it's very difficult to get better all by yourself.
Yeah. So let's go to somebody who's listening to this who might have an issue themselves. Because one of the questions I wanted to ask is, this is kind of a spectrum, as you talked about. I think a lot of people find themselves having a couple beers on the weekend, and then suddenly it's a lot of beers on the weekend, and then it's some beers during the week, and then, it's a lot of things. Or sometimes it's pornography once in a while, and then it becomes pornography every day. And so, how can somebody be evaluating themselves to say, hey, am I in control of this behavior, or is this behavior starting to become in control of me, and work with their parts to start to make some progress, either once it's become an issue or before it becomes an issue as they're sliding down that scale?
I would say that anyone who's actually struggling with an addictive process where the stakes are getting higher sort of lives within this constant inner battle between the craving to do the thing or things and the parts of them that actually are growing more and more disgusted with themselves. So they have an escalating sense of needing to use, feeling shame, getting back on track, getting exhausted, feeling worthless, needing to use. This is getting escalated so that it might go through a few cycles of that a day, whereas before it was just on the weekend. So it's tending to grow. So what we always do in psychotherapy is I say, I welcome both sides of you. There's parts of you that are trying to make this better, of course, but they're trying to make it better in a very harsh, very self-contemptuous way. And parts that are trying to get you relief, but they're getting you relief in a way that's raising the stakes, putting you at risk. Nevertheless, what we talk about is the intentions of those parts. The intention of the soothing side of it is, in fact, to offer some relief and to get away from pressures and get away from emotional pain. The intention of staying on top of things is to keep it all together. So the intentions are great. So we want to honor the intention, but say the behaviors, how to achieve those intentions are going to have to shift over time.
You're saying this, and I thought in my head, where have I experienced this? And one that comes up is dessert.
Yeah.
And anyone who knows me who's listening to this is laughing right now, because I have said for a long time, if cookies were heroin, I'd be dead. I really struggle to not eat a lot of dessert. So, and I have experienced that shame cycle that you talk about, right? It's not just that I'm eating it and it's fine, but I've had the conversation oh, I don't need dessert this week, or I'm not going to eat it during the week. And then dinner's over and I put the kids to bed and I come back downstairs and I know there's ice cream in the freezer and I get that ice cream. And then I'm like, you blankety blank, what did you just do eating that whole big bowl of ice cream? You feel terrible. You are terrible. What is this? And I've noticed that if I keep doing it, that shame does increase each time. Help me stop eating desserts. I say that tongue in cheek, but as an example, what can I actually do? What should I be thinking or saying to myself, or what can I be doing to start to break that cycle for myself?
Well, it's, if we divide our inner world into three big chunks of parts or categories, right? The part that wants sweetness and deserves something, a treat. The part that says, really? No, you don't, and you need to eat healthy. And then there's some vulnerability in there. Let's imagine you've just worked all day, then you've taken care of 2 young kids, you've got a whole bunch of stuff to do. So I would want to, maybe you want a break, right? So I want to listen to the intention of the ice cream eater. It isn't just about ice cream, ever. It's always about, what do I need? And so often it's, I deserve this, or I need a break. So it's that we have to sort of pause it and just ask, what does that part want? The other piece of it is it seems like people come in all the time. I need to work with my dessert eating part, my, scrolling, right? All of the stuff that you do. I just spent 2 hours on Zillow porn, really?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Or
it's
travel porn, destination porn. Yeah.
travel porn, right? Whatever it is,
Yeah.
it's 1 a.m. And so whatever it is, we think I have to work on this, but it's never, those parts don't exist in isolation. They exist in relation to whatever your managers are doing, and they exist in relation to whatever our vulnerability is. So we have to listen all the way around. We want to listen to the parts. How are you trying to help me? I'm trying to give you a break. I'm trying to give you some sweetness. I'm trying to add a little fun to your life. And then want to listen to the parts that are after it. Like, what's that about? And what are you able to happen if you don't just attack the ice cream eater? Like, what happens if you could just say, of course you want ice cream? Whether or not you have it is something else, but of course you want it. What's wrong with wanting ice cream? There's nothing wrong with wanting ice cream. There's nothing wrong with ice cream. What does feel wrong to this part? So much ice cream or whatever. We have to listen to our inner critics, our inner managers, our inner judges. I always say the top 3. Critic only can see what we do wrong, can never see what we do right. Right? You ate too much. You can't see that you did great at work, came home, helped with dinner, put the kids to bed, but really nice. Read them an extra story. No.
Had a big workout, are probably fine, walked a bunch.
Yeah, right. It only sees what you do wrong. Judging, which is moralizing things. That's bad. And perfectionism, which is no matter what I do, I could have done it better. And those 3 are really key. And when someone's involved in some kind of addictive process, mild or major, I know that those 3, this is what I say, the degree to which the soothing behavior is hurtful to self and others, small or great, is matched by an inner voice, an inner diatribe that is emotionally abusive. So abuse, if you will, to self and others is matched by inner self-loathing and contempt. I know. So even that person who comes into your office and is defensive and kind of worn out, I know that their inner conversation is really painful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a great reminder to help build empathy leading into those situations, is to realize that if you're noticing some kind of outward behavior, their internal dialogue is probably twice as loud as whatever your criticisms are of them.
So if we come in from criticism, all we're doing is weighing in on the side of them that they already have that says, I'm a loser, on the F up. And there's nothing there, which will result in them defending.
Yeah.
Right? Because who can live like that? So we're always working with ourselves to back away from judgment and get curious and really stay with that curiosity about what is this really, and assuming that there's vulnerability behind it.
So I love all of this. And I think that I like the balance of, hey, what is this trying to do? And maybe there's a way to lessen, you don't need to eat the whole pint of ice cream. You can just have a bite of ice cream, or instead of eating the whole sleeve of cookies, you can have 1 cookie, or like something like that. But oftentimes, there are people who start and can't stop. And that's what the addictive process gets to, that point where they have 1 beer, they're going to have 15 beers, or they're going to have, 1 cookie, they're going to have 20 cookies, whatever it is. They have to stop. Like, the only way that they can get out of this is to just stop cold turkey. How does somebody work through whether they can control that versus whether they need to just give it up completely?
It's such a good point. What I would say is that the conversation I want to have with that person is, could you use a break? And what will help you have one? So you're in a constant battle between hating yourself and feeling completely shamed and out of control. And you're scared. There is fear in there. It's not just the fear of the people around them. That person themselves is scared too. So if I'm having that conversation, I might say, is there any part of you that's just kind of afraid that it's at this point? So then I will say, and I want to have here are some resources. What have you thought about what might help you? So here's where you might go into an intensive outpatient where someone can go for 4 or 5 hours at the end of the workday. You say, I think these conversations are maybe not enough. Have you thought that you might need more help than you're currently getting? And of course, at some point, someone in your position may have to say, we're not comfortable with you in this position. we think that this is running your life in a way that's not helping you here. We want to ask you to take some action. But what I'm wanting to have when I'm talking with someone around this as a clinician is to just help them be with their fear and let's decide together what you can do. And I don't get into sobriety for the rest of your life. And again, like your hostage takers, I'm not going to discuss whether or not you're going to jail in the rest of your life. I'm going to discuss how can we get out of this. So what's happening now isn't working for you. And it's going to be a process for them to wake up to the fact of what they need to do to maintain themselves for the rest of their lives. And we don't have to decide that today. What we have to decide today is today working for you? And can you do this all by yourself? Or do you need more? I might say to someone at this point, I can't help you like this. For instance, outpatient. I can't help you like this. Let's talk about something else. So sometimes people aren't ready and I say, then come back to me when you're ready. But I try to stay in dialogue with them. I don't send people away from therapy because they're not ready today. And again, that might be a little different in HR in terms of what some of your boundaries have to be.
Yeah.
But what my goal is to stay in dialogue with you, even if you're not ready, and say there's parts of you that are scared to go and say, I don't need to go. And there's other parts of you that are scared that it's getting worse. And I just sit with those two parts and they moving the ball forward. And sometimes it doesn't go as fast as I wish it would.
Yeah.
But the point is sending someone to rehab only, and I've seen it, only to come out and go right back to the bar.
Let me ask you about that, because in the corporate world, there are situations where somebody does something, right? And you say, look, this has to change or you can't be employed here because we can't take the risk of having you here.
Right.
And we don't want to fire the person. We want to give them the chance. But to your point, like, we haven't taken the time to get them there because we don't really have that time anymore. What's the best way to help somebody get that kind of help and recognize that they are under that kind of pressure or situation, and give us the most likelihood or the highest likelihood of success? I
think that an employment situation where someone values their job is a wonderful place where you guys have enormous opportunity really to have these conversations because people care about their work, not just to find that for their ego, right? And their sense of who they are, and obviously also for their financial stability. So what I would say is, this is where we're at. We've had a couple conversations here, and this is where we're at. We no longer feel safe and comfortable with you here. We are asking that you take some steps to really be taking a break on your using the word. It's happening too often at work. We're not okay with it. But the general mission you want to, if you can do it, is I'm not firing you. We want you back. That sort of never give up kind of feeling. Yeah. We believe in you. I want to just say, I believe in you today, like I believed in you 6 months, but I also see something changing in you. And maybe you can't say that to me today, but I can only say that this is where it's at and this is what we see. And we want you back. We want you your best self. And this is what we're asking for you to do, but we can no longer keep you here. And this is what we can offer you. This is what your insurance can do for you. And be really, really clear. Boundaries are okay. It's really okay to have a boundary. You also, much as you don't want to delay the conversations of people who need them, you don't want to be afraid to have a boundary, to say this is okay and this isn't, or this is where we're at. You don't want to threaten people, but you want to be realistic with people.
Yeah, I was just going to say that because I've sensed that balance from you throughout the conversation that we're having of like, we want to be empathetic. We want to demonstrate compassion and belief and caring in this person. But I also hear you being very direct and very clear about what you're seeing, the impact it's having, the boundaries that need to be drawn, the behavior that is and is not acceptable. You're very direct in that setting. And I think people often confuse needing to give somebody empathy and belief and caring with not being direct about what the problem is and what they need to see. And I think that's where a lot of people get to trouble. I know I've felt that before because...
Of course.
So could you just I think you've talked a lot to it, but could you talk specifically to how to strike that balance?
I will say that one of the things that helps us be direct that I like about internal family systems, when we talk about parts of a person, when you say there is a part of you that's really putting you at risk now. You have other parts you actually that are still showing up at work, doing a home, paying your bills. There's other parts you're still functioning right now. And I see that too. I see some of that changing, but I see, some people are unbelievably functioning considering how impaired they really are, right?
Yeah.
So you say, I see both. And I suspect that there's a part of you that really don't feel good about any of this inside. But this part of you right now, what we see is that it's taken up too much space and it's actually affecting your ability to do your best here. So using parts language, I think, can really, really be useful because that is how it is. If they're working for you, they're working. They're still at work every freaking day. I sometimes, in the compassion, they're going to work with ankle weights on their feet, right? Every waking up, every morning. And this is how they're coming. And I would honor that. You're going, and I know that you're suffering in there. I know you are. And at the same time, this is what's going on here. I always say there's never an excuse and there's always a reason. I'm not here to excuse behavior. I'm not here to excuse consequences. I'm not here to minimize consequences. That doesn't help.
Yeah.
But I am here to give hope. There are reasons. I don't know what they are, and you might not know what they are, but there are reasons why it's gotten this crazy for you right now. And I think if you talk to some people, you can figure that out. And when you know the reasons, you'll have a way forward. So there's always hope. I always stay hopeful. I always say you can do this. I always say we can get further. And I always say you can understand this. People forget. They've been doing it so long they don't remember. They don't remember what got into it, right? Process.
Yeah.
It's drinking a little crazy in high school, a little bit in college, and it was never a problem. And now they're 40,
Yeah.
So they forgot why. But you want to say there's hope and there's reasons, and you can get control of this thing. But not this way. I don't see it happening right now.
Yeah. I think it's so important to remember and to remind people that two competing things can be true at the same time.
Yes.
We forget that. And when something gets brought up, it's easy to forget the other side of it. And it's so important in so many areas of life to remember that two competing ideas can be true together. Like the person can be a great father and coach and whatever, and they could be underperforming at work and need a lot of behavioral improvement. Like those two things can be very true. And so I like being able to highlight both. I like that
Yeah, it's a really good thing. It's so often that, again, in the sort of the traditional recovery world, everything is judged on, are you sober yet? And the sort of the harm reduction movement is any positive change. And I know, so even when you're talking to your employee that's still struggling, you also want to say, hey, we met a few weeks ago, and I just want to say, this is what I've seen changing, and this is what I see doing well. Any positive change is a move forward. And yet at the same time, we're not exactly there yet. And if you have some time and some patience and some leeway, give it to them. And when you don't, you don't. Then you have to, you can let them know, this is what, if we get to this point, we'll have a different conversation. But at this point, we're having this conversation. So any positive change is really important. And I don't want to judge someone's success by one factor of their life. And that sets up defensiveness too.
Amen.
Right?
Because that's what we do, isn't it?
Right.
We kind of take the thing with the highest prominence, and that's what we label everybody, right? Steve Jobs was the founder of Apple. That's who he was. And everything else is like left in the wash.
Right. And for an employee, for you to be able to see them as a whole person, someone who's got some vulnerability, someone who's managing a lot, and someone who's also struggling and suffering. If you can see all those pieces, allows you to be able to have a better conversation.
Cece, I'm looking through my list of questions that I prepared, and I have not looked at this once during our conversation, and we've hit almost everything, I think. So,
all right.
Is there anything else that we haven't covered from your perspective that you think is important to hear? Either somebody who's helping somebody through an addictive process or somebody who might be facing an addictive process. Is there anything left to say? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot left, but is there anything you want to comment on here that we haven't touched on that you think would be important to round this conversation out?
I guess I'll just underscore that it's really normal to react negatively to people who are acting out.
Mm-hmm.
It's normal to have judgment for them. So you really want to just let yourselves have that judgment, step it back. And as you said, you say the third thing when you're having your conversation, because defensiveness creates sort of that management, that desire to get in control in us. And when we're in that position, if what we really want to do is reach the person, we want to start from a place of curiosity and hold our judgment back. And that is the best possible way to reach them. If we can't reach them from a place of equanimity, that's where they're at right now. But that's our best opportunity. And just normalize that you're going to react or you're going to be afraid. They're scaring you a little bit. These are normal reactions to out of control behavior, and you're going to have them, but you don't want to act from them because that just adds to the reactivity.
Well, Cece, you did not disappoint here today. I think this is an episode that people could go back to over and over and over again and pull things from. I know I'm prepared to do that as I think about how to support people in my own life and even for myself, to evaluate different behaviors. I love the concept of flagging when you are doing something and then feeling shame about doing it, even if it's just a little bit. I think that's a good flag to say, hey, do I need a break here?
Right.
I like that. So this is great. To anybody listening, I really hope this helps you have better conversations in your life. I wish you the best of luck. These are difficult conversations, but they are definitely worth having if we care about the people in our lives and we want to help them improve. And I think anyone listening to this episode, I think it's fair to say probably does. So thank you, Cece. Good luck to everybody out there. All the best to a happy, healthy life.
Thanks, O'Brien. Thanks for having me.
Hey folks, one last thing before you go. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to hit subscribe so you can stay up to date with future guests. That's it. Thanks for coming. Go make the most of your business and the people in it.